This R1200C was brought in with a non-functioning clutch lever. Customer added fluid, made no difference. We can suspect the slave cylinder has failed, and we will be replacing that today. Slave cylinder is held on by 3 Allen screws. The clutch line and the bleed line are held on by an additional 2 Allen screws. So you will need a 5mm Allen with a socket to get to the 3 on the back of the R1200C model slave cylinder. I suggest taping off a swing arm on this model, just so you don't ding the finish on the swing arm. The slave on this model is easily accessible, with the exception of the lines, which are not so accessible with the slave cylinder still installed. So in this case, we're going to remove the slave cylinder and then loosen and remove the clutch hose and the bleed hose. And our third one is in the upper right, which we will get from the right side of the bike. Customer stated that when the clutch lever ceased to function, as it should, it had no resistance at all, therefore the clutch was not disengaging. Customer checked the fluid level and found it to be empty, and what little was there was gray. Gray is an indication that the bearing on the slave cylinder has failed. So, give this a little. We see very dark fluid here. We see a lot of fluid already leaking out onto the lift. No fluid should leak out of the slave. We have not disturbed any of the lines. So at this point, we're going to move the slave cylinder to a position that will allow access to the banjo fittings for the brake, the clutch hose. So I'm going to snip this zip tie here. Access to the lines up here is rather difficult, so if you kind of push the slave forward and to the left, you can get it out to this point, and which will give it a little more access to the screws, the banjo bolts. We've already loosened our 2 banjo bolts. Just for reference, the line closest to the transmission is your clutch line. It goes from the handlebar down to the slave. The one towards the back is your bleed line, which on this model ends right here. So at this point, we will remove these 2 screws, take the slave cylinder off, and replace it. Once you get the slave cylinder exchanged, you'll be ready to torque the banjo bolts. These torque to 7 Newton meters. 7 Newton meters. Once you have the new slave cylinder positioned where it is going to go, you will find it will not fit flush against the back of the transmission. This is because the piston has not been pushed in. Piston inside the slave cylinder. You're going to have to do that by hand as you thread the screws in. You can certainly push this in by hand and then thread one screw in right to the end, finger tight, and then install the other 2 screws. Or if you have a helper, have them hold it down and put all 3 in. Once you have the 3 screws installed, you're going to torque them to 9 Newton meters. Your clutch banjo bolts were 7 Newton meters, requiring a 4mm Allen. These mounting bolts get torqued to 9 Newton meters, as they will require a 5mm Allen. So we set our quarter drive torque wrench. And we'll get these torqued. You can remove your tape. And we're going to remove the bike from the lift because with these handlebars, the bike needs to be on the side stand with the handlebars turned completely to the right in order to even get close to having this level. So that's our next step, is removing this from the lift. An even more effective way of doing this is to lean the bike on the right side, leaning the cylinder or the foot peg against your lift so that this reservoir is somewhat level. So next we're going to remove the cover with these 4 Allen screws. Then we will add fluid and bleed the system out. See, our boot is sucked in from fluid running low, and we have clear fluid that the customer likely added. We will top that up and bleed it down to the bottom. But before we bleed the slave cylinder, we need to bleed the master here. So what you're going to do is just gently depress the lever until the air bubbles are gone. You may need to slap it or tap it like this. Whatever you do, you need to do this until the bubbles cease rising from the master. This could take anywhere from 30 seconds to 30 hours if you're not situated right. The key to all of this is make sure that the master is the highest point. Specifically the hole in the master cylinder is the highest point. So in this case, we're good, but we're close to being level here. You might even need to lean the bike further to the right to make this bleed out properly. You can see here we're getting close. We're not really getting any bubbles yet. No, there's some more. So keep doing this till the bubbles are gone. When you're satisfied that the master cylinder has been bled out completely, take a 10mm wrench and your 8mm wrench. And now you will open the speed bleeder. You only need to turn this about 1 full turn, 1.5 full turns for it to work. Next, find some sort of hose and container to attach to the speed bleeder, because we're now going to pump the fluid from the master through the slave cylinder and out the bleed line. Don't let this run dry. You should get about 25 to 30 pumps before this reservoir is empty. And if the fluid level is not moving, open the bleeder some more. This one is not moving. And sometimes you'll have a fucking speed bleeder that doesn't actually bleed. So we have removed it and reinstalled the stock bleeder, which is not a speed bleeder, which means you have to pump the lever, crack it open, repeat, repeat, repeat. So if you're doing that by yourself, pump the lever a few times and tie it off with a rubber band to keep it pulled in tight. To wrap this up, as I said, I had to reinstall the stock bleeder and bleed it manually. If you have to do that by yourself, obviously cover the tank, pump your master cylinder up, tie it off with a rubber band, holding the lever all the way in, of course. And then you can crack the bleeder open, close it, come back, take the rubber band off, pump it. Keep doing that until you get a decent lever out of up here. You should start to feel engagement about here, halfway through its travel. Hence the reason for the cover. So, and you have to bear in mind that depending on the clutch disc's wear limit, how worn it is going to depend on where this lever is going to engage, provided this is properly bled out. Fluid level, again, as I've mentioned too many times prior, it must be at the minimum to the middle, not higher. It's a little bit difficult with these bikes because of the pullback buckhorn style handlebars. So as you see with the bike upright, it's almost pouring out the corner. So if you were to put any more than that in, it would be leaking. And now we will reinstall the cap. Before you put your cap back on, cover back on, pull this boot out, make sure there's no moisture inside. This one is dry. Correct the shape of the boot, and we're going to put some copper anti-seize on these screws. You want to finish up by making sure there's no brake fluid left in here, reinstalling the cap, and zip tying it back into place right here. Once you've zip tied that back into place, generally, if time allows, put it back on the lift, clean the surface of the lift. I've already started it and tested the clutch action, which works well, but pump it several times. Make sure it feels the same each time, and then let it sit for a little while and verify that you have no leaks. Once you're positive you have no leaks, you're ready to go take it for a ride and consider the job done if the test ride goes well. And that's it. Models other than the R1200C are not always so easy to replace the clutch slave, as they are sometimes obstructed by other components. But that's it for this. Hope that was of some use. Have a good day. Tools and parts required for this job: 1/4" drive torque wrench, 1/4" drive ratchet, couple of wobbly end extensions, 4mm and a 5mm Allen socket, side cutters for the zip tie that holds the clutch bleed line in place, of course your painter's tape, your duct tape to go over the painter's tape to add a little cushion in case you smack the swing arm with a ratchet, your new slave cylinder with a gasket and new crush seals, replacement speed bleeder to replace the stock bleeder or the grub screw goofy bleeder used on the later bikes, 10mm and an 8mm wrench, and of course your bottle of synthetic .4 brake fluid.